Go Blue, I'm Steve Dace, and we're going to do something here on Michigan Podcast we've never done before and never had to do before. Our producer, Aaron, is still on vacation, so therefore so am I. That means no new episode of Michigan Podcast this week. So I thought maybe I would do something a little bit ad-libbed here from the Michigan Man Cave, which is almost 24 hours now since we kicked off against TCU in the Fiesta Bowl, almost 24 hours exactly, actually. And yeah, I mean, I'm still pretty disappointed. You know, I don't want to get into a situation ever that 13-1 with a slobber knocking of Ohio State, you know, an absolute dominating win in the Big Ten championship game, and a top 5 finish in the country is ever a disappointment. I don't ever want to get to that point. And that's certainly not the case here. I mean, we're on one of the great runs we've ever been on as a program, ever. I mean, this year we had our greatest point differential in a season since the Fielding Yost point-a-minute squads at the turn of the 20th century. You're talking about our first outright consecutive Big Ten championships in 30 years. I was in high school last time we did this. First win in Columbus, Ohio since 2000. We were counting hanging chads back then. I mean, I don't want to take anything away. Back-to-back Joe Moore Awards. No program has ever done that. We had our first Outland Trophy winner. I mean, I don't want to take anything away from this season and just how incredibly enjoyable it actually was. So let's make sure we state that from the outset and then get into this game against TCU in particular. Once we went down 21-3, I gave up on the broadcast because I knew everything they were going to say. And I decided we were given a rare opportunity, a chance to watch the All-22 Eye in the Sky in real time. So I watched that on ESPNU for the rest of the game. And you know, the old saying when it comes to film breakdown that the eye in the sky doesn't lie. There are some things I noticed in that All-22 that I think need to be discussed. That I don't think these are things you're going to pick up on the game broadcast, by the way. So here are some things. Number one, TCU rushed 4, at the most 5 guys most of the game. But it's just a lot of times in that stack, they disguised who the 4th or 5th rusher was going to be, or that guy delayed coming until well after the snap. Our offensive line was confused all game long. Our offensive line, you'll see players stick with double teams longer than they had to, and J.J. McCarthy was facing free rushers the entire game. The other thing that you noticed, our route tree or route progression for our receivers, and that's been the most disappointing unit on our team this year. And that was the best unit on Saturday. Kind of gives you an idea of how well we played, that our worst unit was our best unit, our receiver unit. But man, the routes we ask our receivers to run are really laborious. Like and you guys, if you follow me on Michigan Podcast, you know I've been screaming about this for years. We don't spend enough time attacking the middle of the field. The last possession we had with a chance to go down the field and win it, everything run on the outer thirds. Obviously, they're protecting the sidelines. They don't want us to get out of bounds. That's pretty obvious. The whole middle of the field is open. We just don't attack the middle of the field very often. Not by design. If we attack the middle of the field, usually it's by a trick play like the flea flicker that Ronnie Bell just scored a touchdown on. Usually it's like that. And then, you know, do we have a quick slant or any? I mean, what are the quick open routes we have? A lot of our routes require guys to make a couple different moves. And you're just at this level with the pressure that's put on a quarterback, which I'll get to that more in a minute. It just has to be quicker than that. I mean, it just seems like an antiquated group of routes. And again, let me reiterate, these are things that get exposed when you're playing the other elite teams, right? And the margin for error here. I mean, we're trying to make now as a program the hardest leap there is to make. from a top 5 program to a national champion. And it's been 25 years since our last national championship, guys, and only 13 schools have won a national championship in the last 25 years. And a lot of those 13 schools that won them, Alabama, Oklahoma, Florida State, Miami, those are schools that were winning them the previous 25 years too. It's hard to win a national championship. So I want to make sure we put this in perspective because we had an incredible season. But we're now talking about how do we finish this thing off? Because a lot of this team's going to be back next year. You're going to be a preseason number 1, number 2, number 3 at the lowest team next year. So how do we take that extra step? And that's what we're talking about here. The kinds of things that when you're not just physically better automatically than the opponent get exposed. And these were the kinds of things that with a month to scout us, TCU exposed on us yesterday in this game. I didn't think Donovan Edwards wasn't missing holes. There just weren't a lot of them. Now, we still ran the ball for over 200 yards when you take away sack-adjusted yardage, but there just were not a lot of holes in this game from a rushing standpoint because our offensive line was confused. This was easily their worst game of the year, maybe their only bad game of the year. I mean, when you look at what they have done all year long. But I do think that we really missed Blake Corum. I think those 2-yard runs that Donovan Edwards was getting with Blake and his size and power, those are more 3 or 4 yard runs, and you're staying further ahead of the sticks than we were most of this game. And then, of course, you really missed Blake Corum in the red zone. I don't have to get into the red zone play calling and the abomination that was. You all saw the same thing I did on the game broadcast. So, I mean, that is what it is. But you really missed having Blake Corum down there as your sledgehammer. And then finally with J.J. McCarthy, I think that you see this from the All-22. He's got some work to do when it comes to climbing the pocket, or as Devin Gardner calls it, getting into the fight, being pocket aware. And, there were times where it seemed like he was too late to bail. Times he hung in there too long. And that's just reps, man. And remember, we're talking about a guy that didn't have an offseason last year rehabbing that shoulder. So you can give me mental reps and everything else. It ain't the same as I got the ball in my hands and I'm running this rep to throw the ball and I'm facing defensive contact if I don't, or even if I do. Those are really the reps that count. If it was just all mental reps, then they'd never hit in practice. That's not really what it is, and it's not about that at all. So he missed an entire offseason of development this year, and I think you'll see him take a leap into a surefire first-round pick into the NFL draft by the time we're having this conversation a year from now about however next season turns out. But those were things that were absolutely exposed. And then finally, on the defensive side, our tackling in space was really bad. I mean, just some Greg Robinson, Rich Rod era kind of stuff. It was really bad. I think Mozzie Smith was addressing it at the end of the game kind of indirectly, but he was really talking about linebackers not filling gaps, not knowing where to be, not being assignment sound, not tackling well in space. Now, the biggest culprit, of course, was DJ Turner on that back-breaking touchdown to Quentin Johnston, which this was one case where the broadcast footage I think gave us a more honest look than the eye in the sky. From the eye in the sky, it looked like a tough play, but when you watch it from the broadcast, it's pretty clear that he should have had Quentin Johnston and short of the sticks, and TCU would have punted. We were down by 3. We've got all the momentum. Maybe we'll go down there and take the lead. But hey, guys, we can get in all that kind of stuff. Some of these are mistakes you're going to make when you're playing other great teams, right? TCU made some mistakes too. They had, 3 turnovers as well. So you're going to make mistakes at this level. Right? It's the old Lloyd Carline, football ain't a game of perfect. Right? So when you're playing other great teams, and if you're in the college football playoff for that season anyway, you're an elite team, particularly if they're only picking 4. So when you're playing other elite teams, these are the kinds of things that sometimes will happen because you're not just imposing your will or playing from the front or in full possession of the momentum while you're leaning on an opponent or dominating them the entire time. So in the end, it really comes down to this. Michigan lost by 6 points, had 2 possessions where it got inside TCU's 5-yard line, 3-yard line actually, and didn't score any points. I mean, that's really, we can throw all the other analysis I just gave out. That really is the game right there. And it's a very disappointing loss, no question about it. But if you're a Michigan fan, you're used to this. I mean, major bowl games have been this program's kryptonite my entire lifetime. Michigan is now 1-7 in its last 8 major bowl games. Harbaugh has yet to win one at Michigan, hasn't won any bowl games since his first year in 2015. Michigan has one major bowl win since Tom Brady's comeback in the Orange Bowl, the night that we were all fearing the computers of the world resetting us back to the Stone Age with that crisis. You remember that year. And if you look at the history, really, of the modern bowl system, we only win about one of these a decade. Michigan won one Rose Bowl in the 40s, one Rose Bowl in the 50s. That was the only major bowl game you could go to. Won one Rose Bowl in the 60s. That was the only major bowl game you could go to in the Big Ten in those days. Didn't win any major bowl games in the 70s. Won 3 of them in the 80s, 3 of them in the 90s. Won none of them in the 2000s. Won one in the 2010s, and hasn't won any so far in the 2020s. So when you average that all out, that's about one a decade. I think what's the most frustrating is it's rare to be a 7.5 point favorite in a college football playoff game. Now, it won't be as rare when we expand to 12 here in a couple of years, but right now, it's rare to be a 7.5 point favorite in a college football playoff game. It doesn't happen very often. It's extremely rare for a program like ours. And so you just feel like, man, was that an opportunity missed? You saw that Georgia is very good. I mean, they're 14-0, defending national champions, absolutely deserve to be number one. But that ain't the Georgia team we lost to last year. That's a team that Michigan maybe could have gotten. I doubt I would have picked Michigan, but last year maybe you give Michigan a 20% chance to win the game. Maybe this year you give them 30%. That's a market improvement. And so these opportunities, I was talking to my buddy Joe Simon, a lot of you know him, earlier today, and he's like, I just feel like, man, I don't want to, get down on the program because we're having a great run, but it just feels like that might have been our best shot at winning a national championship the rest of my lifetime. Who knows? It might have been. We haven't won one in 25 years. Before that, you had to go back to 1948, So, yeah, they don't come around very often. Now, a lot of this team will be back next year. And I think you're looking at an offensive backfield of J.J. McCarthy, Donovan Edwards, and Blake Corum. And a J.J. McCarthy with another year of development. A Donovan Edwards who's now a more seasoned runner. I mean, that's probably going to be Phil Steele's number 1 ranked offensive backfield in his unit rankings in his college football preview when it comes out next June. I think this is likely going to be a preseason top 3 team. And you look at next year's schedule, I think right now it's pretty likely you're in a situation where you're at least 10-1 heading into the game against Ohio State again. I could foresee a scenario next year where Penn State, Ohio State, and Michigan are all 11-1. And then I don't know how the tiebreakers work. Like if we lose at Penn State, but Penn State beats Ohio State at home and we beat Ohio State, I don't know how that works. We'll have to maybe look into that over the course of the off season. There's time and a place for that, but right now is not it. It's just, man. And you just read about, JJ answered one question and then got up and walked out of the presser, couldn't handle it. It's just devastating. And I want to make sure too we give all the credit here to TCU. I mean, they deserve to win the game. That was clearly targeting at the end of the game, but it's of no mind. I mean, TCU was the better team most of this game, and outplayed us and made fewer mistakes most of this game. The fact that Michigan had the ball with a chance to conceivably win the game, given all the mistakes it had made, indicated Michigan for the season is the superior team. But on that day yesterday, TCU deserved to win, and wish them well in the national championship game. It's the first time the Big 12's ever won a college football playoff game. So credit to them. And I know there will be a lot of talk about the officiating calls. It's a cruel twist of fate that the final margin ends up being the touchdown from Roman Wilson that was erroneously taken off the board. But then you have 4 cracks sitting there at the half-yard line. You can't turn around and fumble after that, right? I mean, those 2 calls were bad. Yeah, but, I mean, Michigan just shot itself in the foot so many times. And then to end the game really on maybe the best player in your entire program, Olu Oluwatimi, the outstanding center, snapping the ball off J.J. McCarthy's leg, and that creates a dribbler. And I mean, what an ignominious way. It kind of signifies what yesterday was. When is that like the first bad snap or mistake he's made, like maybe all season, and it happens at that moment. So I don't know. I don't know what Jim Harbaugh does for bowl preparation. This feels a lot like the Bo era, doesn't it? I mean, we're playing a lot of Bo ball. We're winning like we did in the Bo era, playing in major bowl games like we did in the Bo era too. All right. So I'm trying to think. I want to say that it took Bo 7 years to finally win in Columbus, right? And he won by 22. And it took Jim Harbaugh, 1969, 70, so 7 years. It took Jim Harbaugh, 7 years to finally win in Columbus, and he won by 22 points. I mean, how long was it until Bo won a major bowl game? 69 he lost, 71 he lost, 75 he lost, 76 he lost, 77 he lost, 78 he lost. It was on his 7th attempt. Next year, that'd be Harbaugh's 7th attempt, right? Yeah. So kind of feels like maybe we're repeating history here a little bit. But these are rich people's problems. I would rather have these problems than the problems we look like we had at the end of 2020 and 2019 and 2018 and 2017. All right. These are the right kinds of problems to have. Keep knocking at the door, particularly with a 5-star quarterback like J.J. McCarthy, and sooner or later, the door will open. And it's just going to be a long offseason, man, especially with this meaningless basketball season that it looks like we're about to embark on. That team looks softer than Charmin, plays not a lick of defense, has no point guard. Have to watch that for the next 2.5 months. But spring ball will be here before you know it. And the hype train will be back in Ann Arbor for next season, as it should. But this one's going to take some time to get over for sure. Thank you for tuning in, and I hope you enjoyed watching this. We will see you again in the new year on The Big Show here on Michigan Podcast. Until then, go Blue.